Hi guys, welcome back. Um, Before I continue on where I left off, I know I kind of been procrastinating, not continuing reading, because you guys know me. I do other live stream video games and especially Let's Build Lego. I did some reorganization with my collection. I kind of want to show you, but at the same time, it's a pain to readjust my phone. Don't know if I could. Hmm. Oh, why not? Let's do a quick showing before I continue on. So hold up. This phone is low battery, so I'll make this quick. And yes, of course, you guys could see my cosplay. So I decided to transfer my Lego Star Wars set to this shelf because every time as I hit the shelf, it's so sensitive and shaky. My vintage collection figures gets knocked down, and luckily, my Slave One, or in terms we call it Boba Fett's ship, doesn't fall on me and break, because that's like a very expensive toy I bought. I didn't buy it. It was a Christmas present for my mother, since I bought her a Christmas present. So yeah, I transferred my Legos from these both areas to there, and transferred my vintage collection right here. Is pretty much my vintage collection is my holy grail. It's because after I pre-ordered a figure and it came in today. It was my Luke Skywalker figure. He's the Mandalorian version. And yeah, my other Star Wars set stuff I transferred right here. Anyway, excuse me 1 second. I gotta hook up my other phone. So anyway, I'm not asking you guys to feel sorry for me or cheer me up. Right now I'm too stressed out, and oh God, it is work related, but I cannot mention it. I am going to swear, but I've already got a new asshole ripped open. I don't want to deal with another one right now, and I might not sleep. I just don't know what to do, you guys. All I could do is, you guys on YouTube, I appreciate you, even though I didn't have a lot of subscriber. I appreciate if you do push a like button on a few videos. I appreciate it. I mean, the reason why I live stream, so I could look back and see when I'm old, looking at the video, I'm just like, wow, that's really my young self. I just, man, I've never felt this stressed before. I want to talk about it, but on live stream, I don't know if it's a good idea. So all I could do is right now is continue on this book, Legacy of the Force volume, Betrayal. And where we left off, yes, I only read one chapter, so I thought I continue on. So we're on chapter 2. In the next chamber, racing between and across assembly lines while workers ducked to get out of their way or, occasionally and more foolishly, lunged at them, Jason and Ben spotted turbo lift doors. It took a moment to get to them, and another moment to realize that the sensors indicate no movement of the turbo lift beyond even when they pressed the summon button multiple times. With a sigh of exasperation, Jason cut his way into the turbolift shaft, and he and his apprentice leapt through the hole, its edges still glowing, to grasp the diagonal support spars on the far side of the shaft, clinging there. Clinging there, they could see the turbolift car roof about 10 meters below. But this shaft was side by side with another, and the car in the shaft was only a few meters down and rising fast. Jason swung over the second shaft and readied himself for the shock of impact when the turbolift car reached him. He could feel Ben following his motion, could even feel it as Ben also began focusing on aspects of the force that would allow for the exertion of kinetic energy. Then the rising car hit them. They absorbed the shock with their knees and with control over the force, and suddenly they were hurtling upward along the darkened shaft. Jason estimated that they'd risen 300 meters or more before the car executed a rapid deceleration and locked into place a mere 3 meters before the top of the shaft. Jason and Ben both grabbed at support spars at the shaft side. After a moment's noise from beneath, hissing of opening doors, tramping of feet, conversation, closing doors, the car dropped out of sight, leaving them alone in comparative silence at the top of the shaft. "I think we're above ground," Ben said. "Well, above ground." Jason ignited his lightsaber and plunged it into what he assumed was the back wall of the shaft, the direction opposite that of the turbolift doors lining the shaft below them. He dragged the blade around in a circle, and just before the end of the dragged the blade around in the circle. That's so Qui-Gon. Anyway, and just before the end of the burning circuit met the beginning, the plug he was cutting was yanked violently away into daylight brightness, spinning out into open space. A tug of air nearly yanked Jason after it, and more air roared up the shaft to flee through the hole he'd cut. Outside the hole was a skyscraper vista of the city of Kartan, part of the nation of Kartan and government capital of the planet of Audemars. The Jedi could see 40-story apartment buildings thickly lined with balconies, many of those balconies serving as small landing pads for personal fighter craft, as well as taller business spires, circular defensive towers whose featureless exteriors hid gun emplacements, and tall flagpoles from which streamed government, neighborhood, sports team, and advertising banners a dozen of meters in length. Jason leaned out. The building wall beneath them sloped away at an angle rather than straight down. Far below he could see skyspeeder traffic in tightly regulated streams through the air. Ben stuck his head out just under Jason's. "Looped. I know how to do this." "Don't say looped." "Why not?" "It's dangerously slang. Invented to distinguish between your generation and every other one by making use of superfluous and irritatingly precious vocabulary, and I'm not from your generation." Ben turned up to look at him. His mouth worked as he sought to come up with cutting reply. Jason continued, "Do you have a grapnel and line in your utility belt?" "Sure, but I won't need it. I know how to do angle building drops like this. Get ready anyway." Ben grumbled but pulled the grapnel from his belt and dragged out a few meters of slender, strong cord. "All right, Ben, you first." Ben grinned and leapt outward. Jason flipped his lightsaber back onto his belt and followed. They fell a few meters, but Jedi acrobat training and their control over the Force allowed them to come down with their heels against the angled building wall. From that point, it was a simple matter of reducing their inertia, keeping friction maximized between heel and wall surface. They ran and occasionally slid down the side of the skyscraper along direct concrete strips set between broad, high transparisteel viewpoints. On the other side of those viewpoints, they saw faces with mouths open in surprise or disbelief. Jason sensed the wind gust a moment before he felt it. He braced himself against it with foot placement and the force before it hit. Then, less experienced didn't. Jason saw the boy's cape flap. Then Ben was whirled away from the building face, yelling. Jason reached out for him, but the boy, still mostly clear-headed, was already hurling the grapnel hook toward him. Jason snatched it out of the air and wrapped the cord several times around his wrist before the cord hit its maximum length. Jason braced his arm against the shock of the impact and withstood it without being dragged off the building front. With core control and extra tug against Ben himself through the force, he dragged Ben back to the building face. Now Jason was in front on the desk, decent Ben meters above and behind. Give me a second, people. I need to get some drink. I'm slobbering. Hi, Victor. Glad you stopped by. He heard Ben shout, "You can let go now." The boy's voice sounded appropriately abashed. Jason released the grapnel. "You know how to do angle building jobs like this, huh?" "What?" I said. "Can't hear you? Too much wind?" Jason grinned. "Up 90 degrees. Jason looked up in the direction Ben indicates, above, just over skyscraper level. A blue-green flying vehicle was banking at them over a tower dome. It wasn't shaped like the split-tail blade series of starfighters produced on this world and flown recreationally. And for the duels, by so many Adamari, this was shaped roughly like a starfruit. One central body and 5 arms protruding from it. The arms ended in stubby housing that Jason could see, held thrusters, repulsor vents, and weapons muzzles. He decided that the vehicle would be slow but highly maneuverable, and capable of attacking in any directions, perhaps several directions at once. The arms rotated as a unit, but independent of the vehicle's central body, where Jason could see a darkened transparisteel canopy protecting the pilot's seat. Not that this was likely to be a threat to the Jedi, unless the vehicle was armed with anti-personnel weapons systems, something capable of piercing flesh but not penetrating typical building construction material. The odds of it making a natural attack were low. Excuse me. The vehicle's foremost pods fired. Jason saw the smoke trails of a missile headed their way. He felt an exertion in the force from Ben, the boy leaping laterally. He added some kinetic energy to his own downward motion, reduced friction to his heels and butt tucks. He sat down and slid faster. The missile impacted dozens of meters above his head. He heard the explosion, felt the building shake beneath him, but was not hit by any heat or debris. The warhead must have penetrated into the building before detonating. A little part of him went cold, infuriated at his enemy's callous willingness to risk and kill civilians to bag the targets, but the rest of Jason remained analytical. He put on the brakes, stepping up heel friction and coming more upright again. Please forgive me, my reading sucks. The enemy fighter spun closer. then dived past him and out of sight. Out of sight? Jason leaned forward. Yes. The building surface did seem to come into an end, only a few dozen meters below him, but still well above street level. That meant the angle had a change at the point, becoming a vertical drop. The attacker was below the drop point, waiting. Jason turned his attention to reflections in the space scrapers in the distance ahead of him. There, he could see the enemy fighter. It was flush against this building, its central body still and its legs rotating. 4 stories below the drop-off point, several meters to the right of where Jason would go over the edge. If he kept his current angle of descent, of course. As the distance to the drop point shortened, he bounced across one bank of viewpoints, then another, ending up a Duracrete strip, head straight for a point above the enemy fighter. Then he reached the lip. He was now only about 20 stories above the ground below. He could see a main avenue thick with traffic and, for the first 4 or 5 stories above street level, heavily crisscrossed with cables, private communications cables, strung across streets all over Adamar to give neighbors secure communication access with one another. Directly below Jason was the fighter craft. Jason somersaulted as he went over the lip. Then came down, straddling one of the fighter's arm, just beside the vehicle's main body. The fighter jolted from the impact and dropped a couple of meters to the transparent steel canopy. Jason could see a helmeted pilot, her body language showing alarm at the sudden proximity of her enemy. She jerked the control yoke. The fighter spun away from the building. Let's see how far is it? It's not that far. Please let me continue on drinking more soda. In his peripheral vision, Jason saw a grapnel and white cord wrap around another of the vehicle's arms. They angled away from the building, rolling out high above the avenue, then dived straight toward the ground. Jason grinned. It was a smart enough tactic. All those cables crossing the street would cut an average attacker, assuming an average attacker could end up in this situation. To piece without doing significant harm to the fighter, but Jedi weren't average attackers. Ben pulled himself onto the arm his grapnel had grabbed. His face looked flushed with windburn, and his red hair had been whipped into an unruly mess. Cut your way in, Jason invited. Ben perked up, holding the vehicle on with both legs and one arm. He got his lightsaber into his hand and ignited it. Jason leaned over and looked at the ground, so much closer than it had been just seconds before. He gestured towards it, fingers flexing, and the comm cables directly beneath him suddenly wavered like alarmed serpents. He exerted himself more and they parted, some separating completely from one side of the street or the other. The fighter craft had plunged into their midst but hit none of them. Just before hitting the street, and below where the cable layer ended, the fighter angled to join the ground speeder traffic. The pilot looked at the Jedi, obviously expecting to see limbless torsos or mere goats of blood remaining. She had just enough time to register alarm before Ben plunged his lightsaber blade into the side of the canopy. As he dug around, trying to find the release catch or hinges, the blade almost grazed the woman's thigh. She panicked. That was the only explanation Jason could come up with. She wrenched her control yoke off to the side at an unnatural angle, and the canopy suddenly blew clear, shooting up into the sea of comm cables above, nearly knocking Ben clear as it went. An instant later, the pilot's seat ignited and shot her straight up into the cables half blinded by the ejection seat's propulsion. Jason still saw her hit the first set of cables. They held. She didn't. She and her ejection seat separated into two pieces, each headed a different direction. Jason saw the upper half of her body hit yet another cable, and then her remains were out of sight behind them. Oh damn, I could daydream about. Ooh. Jason glanced ahead. The pilotless fighter was rising. In another few seconds it would hit the cable layer again, this time at an angle that would keep it within that layer for long seconds or even minutes. "Let's go," he said. Ben nodded, deactivated his lightsaber, and dropped clear. Jason followed suit. He saw Ben drop into the back of a ground speeder, bounce out of its though as it bounced out of it as though it were a trampoline. Angle over to bounce onto one end of a dinner table on a street-side second-story balcony. The spray of food dishes catapulting off the table was quite impressive. It then dropped down to street level. Jason contented himself with one bounce from a heavy transport speeder and a tuck and roll as he reached the sidewalk beside Ben. Automari pedestrians gave the two Jedi curious looks but seemed unalarmed. Most of them were watching the fighters plow through the cables overhead. Ben had well-cut lead of some vein in one hand. He had already taken a bite out of it and was chewing furiously. "What? Don't you get enough Jedi Temple food to eat?" Jason commented. Ben shook his head. "What's next?" "Transmit." "Don't you want to do that? You're the Jedi Knight. I'm not the one who needs to learn how to do it." Jason turned and led the way through the sidewalk traffic. If his bearing were correct, the direction would lead them to the hangars where his shuttle waited. With a long-suffering sigh, Ben discarded his improvised metal and pulled the little holocam, a datapad, and a comlink from pouches on his belt, awkwardly handling three items with two not fully grown hands. He began manipulating controls and keyboards, entering commands. "All right, the data package is being compressed and encrypted. While it's doing that, check to see if the shuttle's holocom is still live. Remotely activated and bounce a com echo off the old Lunar New Republic station." "Yes, sir." This time, Ben didn't sound as put upon. This was more of a challenge, done something he'd never done before on his own authority. He typed commands into his datapad, relayed them through the comm link. "Holocam is live." Kilometers away, the communication system aboard Jason's shuttle, a full-fledged holocom unit capable of transmitting through hyperspace and thus communicating faster than light, would have just awakened from its powered-down state. Querying an automated comm system on relay station, "Adu 1104 through to Coruscant." The boy said, his voice, though no deeper, sounded more confident, more mature when he was engrossed in a task like this. Successful echo. Another message popped up on his datapad. "Packet encrypted. Transmitted," Jason said. He kept a close eye on the pedestrian traffic, but he didn't anticipate any problems at this point. It would be some time before the operators of the damned killers firm figured out where the Jedi were. "Await confirmation of reception. Requested confirmation of description." "Yes, sir." Ben typed in another set of commands, then tucked his holocam back in its pouch. It would no longer be needed. "So, how do we get off-world? We go back to the shuttle and take off. But the planet's full of starfighters. One shuttle, even an armed shuttle, isn't going to be able to fight its way through all of them." "Correct. But why would they attack us?" To keep. Understanding dawned in the boy's eyes to keep us from getting off-world with what we found out? Correct. But we just holocast it, so it's too late. Ben checked the screen on his datapad. They got the package. They're they're decrypting. His expression turned suspicious. But what if the Adamari attack us for revenge? Think it through, Ben. Take your time. They reached a broad plaza, and Jason knew his bearings were correct. They were headed back towards the proper hangars, which should only be a couple of kilometers distant. If the package decrypts and the spies see what we saw, they'll start talking to the governments here. Military intelligence, not spies. Oh, they're spies. Ben sounds scornful of Jason's corrections. Mom's a spy? Why do we just did make us spies? Your mother's a Jedi. We're Jedi. Jedi spies? The datapad beeped, and Ben looked at it again. He snapped it shut. The message decrypted. Our spy bosses say, well done. So, they'll talk to the Audemars government. Who know that if anything happens to us, things will be worse for them. Correct. So we can leave and go on to our next assignment? A look of unease crossed Ben's features. Do we have to? Yes, we do. There are going to be a lot of them. Not as many as we just encountered. It's going to be noisy. Not as noisy as that assembly line. Ben heaved a sigh, defeated. A few minutes later, Jason and Ben boarded Jason's shuttle and armored variant of the old Lambda-class model, fitted with a turreted laser cannon and a holocom unit, and lifted off. The shuttle's upswept wings lowered into horizontal position after liftoff, and Jason oriented the craft towards Audemars' sky. A flight of four-blade starfighters, Audemars' distinctive split-tail fighter craft, escorted the shuttle until it left the planet's gravity well and entered hyperspace. Nothing came close enough to fire a shot at the Jedi's craft. And that ended Chapter 2, everyone. And let's see how many pages for Chapter 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just 5 pages. So I'll be doing Chapter 3 tomorrow. Anyway, do I want to continue another chapter? Maybe tomorrow, people. Anyway, you guys have a good night. I might not sleep. So see you guys later.